super loud here. But thank you so much for coming out to see my session. I'm really excited. My name is Ederveen. I'm an independent consultant and I help secure communities. My last role was Executive Director EMEA in a global financial services cybersecurity organization. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, you can? Okay, good. Wonderful. So, I also do research and development for the ISF, the Information Security Forum, who have recently published a paper on diversity, women in cyber. And I can imagine that you are actually a bit tired after a long day of conferencing. So what I've done is prepare lots and lots of statistics for you, because that would go really well with an afternoon nap. No, I think we're going to change things around a bit. We'll make it quite interactive and dynamic and engaging, and we're going to get you in do mode. So that's what Yulta was just referring to, right? That one action. Now, I am actually honored to be addressing this topic with you because I'm also an active tech and innovation influencer and a resiliency and preparedness advocate. So in my spare time, I sit on an advisory board for Cyber London, which gives Londoners future-ready skills and makes London cyber secure. And also, I write articles for the National Preparedness Commission. I am a frequent public speaker, for example, at schools and universities to help get the next generation interested into cyber and tech careers. So, why am I excited about speaking about diversity, equity, inclusion and belonging today? Why do I mentor in that space? Because I'm a huge fan of our amazing industry and our community, and it really is a good feeling to help being able to attract the next generation in and being able to give back. So I started attending cybersecurity conferences at age 16, and when I first went to these events, I felt I'd really found my tribe. I really connected with the people. And that's why I've always loved working in this industry. I find technology super exciting, but I've been able to combine my strong affinity with technology and cyber with, my love for people and working with people, networking, etc. So this really is my happy place. And yeah, I want to help open it up to more people. So please connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And I've got a couple of, acronyms for you up here. So diversity, inclusion. The concept has been called different things over the years. But let's start with the so what. Why is diversity good? What business problem are we actually trying to solve? And so what I'm showing here is some figures of how the UK compares globally for women in cyber in the workforce. And generally speaking, we can see a lack of diversity. And this lack of diversity is bad news, because effective diversity has been shown to improve business performance and enhance prosperity, benefits us all. Doesn't matter what your gender is or any other form of diversity. So the many pros and cons of diversity are actually illustrated with case studies in Matthew's science book. These showing us that to solve the wicked and interconnected problems of our times, we need to break free from limiting echo chambers. And gender is just one of the forms of diversity in the workplace that we're going to be looking at and address. Now, secretly, some of you may not actually be convinced of the need of diversity. So at the end of this presentation, ask yourself whether I've actually challenged your thinking in any way. I've done a lot of research into this, and pretty much anyone I speak to actually agrees that men and women are equal and equitable, but they're not the same. So we will also use gender today specifically to try and illustrate some of the issues around diversity. But very importantly, we're not just going to moan about the status quo. The ISF and I have prepared a number of different pathways for you to address these issues. So we've done all the hard work. You just sit back and relax. Now, of course, for you guys, there's absolutely no pressure to advocate for any kind of particular change, right? This session just provides practical ways of increasing diversity and shows you the benefits of DEIB. It's absolutely up to you whether you want to do something about this or not. But, very important, and I love that we actually have quite a mixed audience here, right? It's important to note that any kind of diversity activity can benefit individuals across the entire spectrum of demographics that we see here, making it easier for any one group to support their families and the economy will help other groups get there too. And that ultimately promotes security and equity, which equals enhanced profitability and better security, and we'll see why. But so for example, if a company gives opportunities for part-time or job share arrangements, this supports any gender, not just mothers. It could also help fathers take care of their children or of, elderly parents, anyone with carer responsibilities. You might have a dog that needs walking twice a day. You might need that flexibility because you're coaching a football team. So any kind of lifestyle choice, or maybe, physical limitations would be helped by enabling better diversity. So gender is just one of the factors that can, make an individual be subjected to certain biases, stereotypes, or other disadvantages. And in fact, some of you may have experienced at some point in your lives age or ageism to be a factor for disadvantage. Maybe someone was told, well, you're too young to be a manager, or we're not giving you this job. It goes to someone who's like, 10, 20 years younger. I hear that a lot of fintech companies can be very ageist, so they don't seem to value experience over perceived dynamism. So these pictures, you're going to see a couple of those. I just took them about a week ago in Malta, and I thought they would sort of brighten up the presentation a bit. But again, why do we need diversity in security? Because diverse teams are more productive. Their risk management is more complete. If security managers are not leading inclusively, their security is not as good. Why is that? Because diversity helps create psychological safe spaces and it avoids groupthink, right? And these psychological safe spaces enable human-powered security. Whereas if you have groupthink or punitive regimes, that actually makes people sort of quite, tunnel vision, narrow-minded, and you're just not going to have the best security. So I'll be giving you tips and concrete actions for increasing diversity and successful allyship, because we can all do our part. Now, here are some steps for increasing diversity, and I think these slides will be shared as well. But as you know, women are 50% of the world population, so any kind of DEIB programs that focus on women, still, they'll have the greatest impact, but they'll also help other possibly disadvantaged groups. And that's why taking these actions, even if directed at gender, a lot of them are actually transferable. So, be creative, and no one needs to feel excluded. So, I'll give you an example, right? For example, one of the things the research showed is that a lot of people would like to see more female role models in cyber, and I've got a couple coming up. But can we not translate that concept to, for example, giving a bigger stage to our wonderful military, ex-military leaders, the veterans that we have work in our industry? I had the great fortune of working with one of them at DB, Deutsche Bank, and he literally set such a shining example for incredible work ethos and kindness and professionalism. So I really think a lot of these elements can be transferred. And of course, we cannot have a session on gender diversity where we do not talk about gender quotas. But gender quotas, you may love them, you may hate them, it's absolutely fine. Nobody's going around saying, wow, this is a perfect concept, they are so great. They are probably a flawed concept, but they actually help open up previously closed groups. So let's just say, someone's part of the old boys network, which is probably based on, let's say, same socioeconomic status or going to the same school, same background. This boys club might lead someone to appoint someone for a job based on perceived similarities instead of whether that person is the best fit for the job. So if we do introduce quotas, we can open up these traditionally closed networks, and for example, the introduction of women would then open it up to other groups as well. But so, like I said, nobody says this is perfect. The ultimate goal would be equity, then we wouldn't need that. But it is an albeit crude tool at opening up groups. And we will actually see later that anyone can be an ally for any form of diversity. But generally, as so often in life, the higher up the ranks you are, the easier it becomes to be an effective ally. But what can we do to increase diversity? Is there anybody here thinking that we actually can increase diversity? Or are we just thinking, very utopian? Anybody here who's feeling hopeful? Wow, I love that. Awesome. Good. Yes, the good news is absolutely we can do something to increase diversity because anyone can be an ally. So I'll provide lots of tips on this. But it's a personal choice. However, if you are not an inclusive leader, you will simply not have the most effective security. So I'm not saying you have to be an ally, but I think inclusive security is an absolute must. Inclusive leadership. And let me walk you through a little exercise, right? So we have looked at various forms of diversity. And out of the ones displayed here, just privately for yourself, think if there's anyone that resonates with you personally that you'd like to do something about. You don't have to divulge this, you don't have to tell anyone which it is, but have a think if any one of these connects. And if you don't, that's completely fine. You might care more about animal welfare or climate change, it's absolutely fine. But if you did, please can you get up? Did anybody pick any reason, any field that they might want to support diversity in, or be an ally in? If so, please get up. Or at least if you're feeling really tired, raise your hand. Okay, thanks. Good. So basically, it is like you have found your reason, your why. You have found your why you want to be an ally. And that will make you an effective ally. If you don't have a good reason, then you're simply not going to be as effective. And allyship, I'm just going to check the time. Oh yes, running low. So allyship should not be something we pressure ourselves into. But during today's networking, if you're staying for a bit longer, or tomorrow, next week, next time you chat to someone about this, why don't you share just one tip? What would you tell your conversation partner to increase diversity or help allyship? And this can be something you learned today, it can be something you already knew, but what one tip would you give them to enhance and help prosper a group that's different to your own maybe? So for example, a little tip is, I will talk to someone least like myself at a conference. And you know what, this is harder than you might think, because you might have to search out something that maybe makes you a little bit nervous subconsciously. This is a little bit about crossing boundaries, but that's how we really increase diversity and how we broaden our horizons. Also, if you're a woman, maybe consider giving a public shout out to another woman for a job well done. Or let's just say, you see someone mansplaining and you publicly call that out and you help the woman take credit for her idea. Because that's something we can do as a community. We can take care of each other, we can pay it forward and give back. And that will help us enhance equity. Now, wonderful, we have a lot of outstanding leaders here in this room, I'm sure, right? And I appreciate the time you've taken and the energy you've put in learning a bit more about diversity, the attention you've paid to the topic of inclusive leadership. But instead of me just talking at you, let's switch things up. Because in fact, it may be you who needs to start having the conversations internally about this. It will be you who needs to get the word out. So it could be someone needs to raise the issue about menopause adjustment, maternity leave, accessibility. So to get you in do mode and get you used to that, I actually would like to invite you to say hi to the person next to you or close to you. Just say hi, maybe your name, ideally to someone you haven't met before. Good job. Have you said hi to anyone?
No one's talking to me. Hi.
Satna, do me a favor, just say hi to the person behind you.
Oh,
It's
hi.
not that to your behind you further. Thank you. Okay, cool. Not letting this go, am I? Right, awesome. Okay, if that made you feel better, then you have, connected with your peers. You have experienced the power of community and community sponsorship. So we can actually lift each other up as women or any other disadvantaged group. Now, this is a very cheerful image, but I'm going to share a sad fact with you guys at this point, because most women have at some point felt disadvantaged, or they've felt to be perceived as less competent by other women due to their gender. Now, I bet you pretty much any woman here has experienced this at some point. Would anybody say you've been perceived as less competent by a woman due to your gender? Okay, I see a couple of hands. Okay, wonderful. Or not. But that's why I always say, and I love saying it in a room full of powerful women just like you, to achieve equity, women must first become each other's biggest supporter. So we all have that responsibility. I see some nodding heads. That's good. That's good. Now, we won't go through this whole list. It's just going to be too much. But I'm going to highlight that allyship can be proactive or reactive, and it can happen behind closed doors. Maybe you're recommending someone for promotion in the leadership meeting, or you're doing it reactively and openly. Like, let's say I'm just going to use the example of mansplaining again. You're witnessing mansplaining, and you're like, hey, that we just heard that from so and so, and actually, it was a good point. So you help the woman take credit for her idea. And I think these types of behavior, we need to see more of that from men and women alike. Now, as said it before, a lot of these tips are transferable, right? It doesn't really matter the form of diversity you want to take. But one I do want to highlight is unconscious bias training. So sometimes we don't even know that what we're saying could be hurtful to someone, like we're saying the wrong thing, but because we grow up in our own bubble, we don't know. So in some ways, I was also a bit nervous to talk about this topic, because when the issue of gender comes up, and let's say, LGBTQIA+, then I always feel, well, am I going to get it right? And I really admire artists like Taylor Swift, who are so knowledgeable in this space, and they can actually influence effectively. So yeah, there's always more to learn. And here I've got a really good example of a Big Four CISO, so this is an example of male allyship, right? I was at an event recently, and a Big Four CISO had this very powerful message about walking the talk, even if it costs money. So what he said to his hiring team, I want this position filled, it's a cyber position. Make sure you get me a woman. And I know it's going to cost more to go to the market to find the right fit, because it would be easier for him to find a male candidate to fill that position. However, he committed and he held his employer accountable for spending that money. So this is some really big stuff. They're grand gestures. They're grand, big items. Not everybody has access to those. However, we cannot talk about diversity and not mention gender washing and diversity washing, right? Because a lot of people find that their firms actually talk and present a very different image when it comes to diversity than the actual things they do on a daily basis. So, the good news for all of us here is to create inclusive leadership, to create an inclusive culture, is that it's the frequent micro actions, the things we do every day, multiple times, they are the ones that create an inclusive culture. They can have a really positive impact on the workplace culture. Okay, so I'm just checking on the time. I think we're all right. What more can be done to be inclusive in our industry? I would encourage conference organizers and podcasters and journalists to make more of an effort to invite diverse speakers. I was at a conference last week, 1,000 people there, one person in a wheelchair, one person. So I'm just thinking, what is that telling us about the culture? Great that they were there, great that the venue was accessible, but have we done enough to actually get the word out to make sure more people with, let's say, physical or neurodivergent individuals felt comfortable in that space? Inclusive recruitment must actively target females, because to attract female talent requires active measures to not subconsciously exclude them. That is, of course, also true for other forms of diversity. So, the only thing to remember here is the tactics will be different. This isn't a one-size-fits-all. So, for example, if you're trying to hire a neurodivergent individual, you might offer them a short Zoom call first before you ask them to travel somewhere, because that could be really, really stressful for them. Or you're making workplace adjustments for a veteran. You're allowing more flexible work. Now, another thing I think we need to look at as an industry is relaxing experience requirements, because we're not going to fill the talent gap if we don't do that. And that also includes hiring for mindset and attitude over skill set. I've got here a slide from earlier this year, Davos. I was in Davos for the World Economic Forum, and I think it needs no commentary, but I do actually recommend the female quotient for their uplifting commentary and active work in advancing gender equity. Now, on that point, we're here at a security event, and I would love for you to make more of an effort to network with women, because a lot of the ones I speak to feel like they're being approached less because they are a woman. Now, I know that's a difficult space, but we have a couple of women in the audience, and I'd like everyone actually to have a think, have you ever done that? You had a room full of people, did you not speak to the woman because maybe you think, oh, she'll be a bit less interesting, a bit less powerful, less useful to me? Now, hand on heart, I have done that, and I'm, constantly training myself to be better. Diversity isn't a one and done. You have to keep working at it. I think we as a society have to do better. However, I cannot actually go without mentioning the topic of unwanted and unprofessional attention. I don't know how many of you have been through incidents in that space, and again, this could be whether you're male, female, neurodivergent, physical disability, but it is something that too many women in our industry deal with, and it has also happened to me, and it was absolutely horrendous and, yeah, not pleasant. So the one thing I always advocate for is events at minimum have to have a code of conduct. And for example, London White Hat Ball does that really well. But we already talked about ageism a little bit, right? So if possible, I would love for you to influence your hiring managers to think about, how can we not make ageism an issue? And that goes both ways, right? Give young people a seat on your board. Have them be junior board advisors, because they are the next generation of influencers, decision makers, customers. You want them to be interacting with your product and learning from them. You want to give them a chance, and you want that experience that some of the older generation have. And So here, she's a really cool role model, actually, 30, under 30, I think. I wanted to talk more about a couple of other female and diverse role models in our industry. So we have here Lisa Forte, Lisa Ventura, she's actually neurodivergent, and then this is the one person in the wheelchair at the conference I was at last week. So just as an example, but he's got a really cool reputation in the industry. So I would love to actually fill this whole slide with more people, and maybe, you know, next time there's one of you up there, because you're a role model for diversity. That would make me really happy. And I think to fill some of the talent gaps we have, to give more people the chance to go into the senior ranks, we really want to highlight non-traditional pathways, you know, non-traditional career trajectories, so they can be how people get into cyber, how they can get back into cyber, maybe after maternity leave, career change. And I think one of the areas we can also do is have things like workshops, apprenticeships, because that helps people become interested in our really cool industry. Another thing we want to do is starting outreach as early as possible, and the role models can be helpful for that. So for example, when I speak at schools, I don't really make a distinction, like if they're in year 3, fine. If it gives them something, if I can teach them something that interests them, great, I'll do it. And yeah, so for example, then when I talk to these kids, I tell them I didn't have a traditional pathway into cyber. I did a little bit of sysadmin, I built a PC from scratch once. I've done networking, computer networking security, and I find deep tech super interesting. But ultimately, I have found a way of combining my people skills with my love of technology. But I would really hope that more people could be given this opportunity. And so there are several ways that can be done, sorry. And we've looked at a few of them. Getting to the end here, so I do want to leave you with a little bit about this, because this is a mistake I see made quite frequently in the space, and quite commonly. So actually, a lot of people talk about equality, but equity is what we're striving for. So when you see the acronym DEIB, I want you to remember that the E stands for equity. Right, promise coming to the close soon. I want to summarize for you guys. Why does this matter? Why does diversity matter? It matters because it's a business issue, a productivity issue, a security issue, a preparedness issue, prosperity issue, you name it. Without a diverse workforce, without inclusive leadership, we simply will not have optimal security, and we will not prosper optimally as a society. But yeah, food for thought. You know, food for thought. A couple of pretty senior people here in the room, I can see that. And I think intuitively we can assess how we can make our industry more attractive to people with different needs. I'm talking job flexibility. What can we do? Job shares, hybrid work, flexible hours. Those would make it more attractive to, for example, women, others with carer responsibilities, any kind of divergent need. And for example, it will also allow dads to take a more active role in raising their kids. We can easily make those accommodations for veterans and help them come back into our industries, even if they have lasting injuries. So I want to say that if our industry genuinely built on these strengths, we would organically attract a lot more talent. Right, so I do want to leave you with, like basically an ask. You are successful leaders. You are actually role models, yes, you are a role model to someone, and during your leadership journey, I know your busyness levels will increase. But please don't forget about the struggles of others, because we all stand on the shoulders of giants. Now, I'll be around for questions. Thank you so much. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Please check out our website as well. And yeah, I hope to see you during the networking.
Thank you.
Thank you.